Welcome everyone back to the table. It's our 10th episode, and today I'm joined by my friend Daniel.
Hello.
Daniel and I met one another, and our wives met one another at Friends Church Fullerton. We were just kind of figuring out where to go to church, and they were there with a nice little gift bag for us, and we ended up starting a couple conversations where we hung out and became friends, and we've been doing a disciple-making community together on Wednesday nights. Mm-hmm. And he always has these really good questions. So I just wanted to bring him to the table so that he could ask some of them on a camera. So
there you go.
Thank you for coming. And yeah, what's on your mind?
I appreciate you inviting me. 10th episode. That's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
Double digits. Yeah, I don't know if I have good questions. My wife actually came up with this question.
I just wanted to get enough. Your wife had
Since we are one, I also have good questions. But the question I'm bringing to the table or discussion is really the idea of those who feel like Christianity is a set of rules or restrictions. And I think we can take it many ways, but I kind of want to talk about two specific ways. One is more of the journey of the Christian, I guess someone in active faith who is kind of struggling with feeling like they're not doing enough. And my wife kind of put it like, what is the line between being obedient and then being legalistic? And feeling like, because I think, her and I've felt it too, when you hear other people doing awesome things, you're encouraged, but there's a little piece of you sometimes that's like, but I'm not doing that.
Am I doing enough?
Right. Yeah. Like what? I'm not living up to my call as a Christian. Because I haven't invited enough people to church, or I haven't brought my neighbor to faith. So what's my place? Where do I belong in this? And how do I do that? So that's kind of part one, which maybe we can start there. The other part of it that I'd love to talk about is more of the outsider, I suppose, the person kind of looking in and observing the Christian faith, having heard about it, but maybe not living it out. And them seeing it as restrictions to life. Yeah,
like a code of rules that we're supposed to be doing, and that's all it is.
Exactly. So why would I want to join something that tells me not to do things that I like to do?
Yeah,
doesn't make sense.
Yeah. So basically, why would I add another set of restrictions to my life of things I shouldn't do or things like that?
Exactly.
Okay. So from what I'm hearing, the first kind of question, I think you articulated it well, like the line between obedience and legalism, like what is that? You kind of expressed there could be this feeling of like, I watch other people living out their faith in ways that for me are encouraging, but it makes me reflect on myself and go like, am I like doing enough? Like, because they're doing this and that and I'm not doing that. So like, should I be doing that? Or is that legalistic to think that way? I love that question because I think that articulates like a place where someone understands that obeying Jesus is a part of our natural Christian walk. Like Jesus said, if you love me, you'll obey my commands. I think it was in John chapter 15. He said that. So I think you capture that tension well, but also you don't want to move to a place where it's like, well, I'm just trying to execute this list of things that I know are good things to do in the name of God, so that I'm really holding to that tension of like, man, I hope Jesus knows I love him because I'm trying to do X, Y, and Z and A, B, and C. I love that question. And I think, we should start there. So is there something that came to your mind or an event that you can think of? Like what prompted that question? I'm kind of curious. Do you think in Kristen or in you or both of you, was there something that happened?
This one, I don't think she would mind me saying it. It's more so prompted in Kristen's heart, and she feels a struggle between this really pure desire to serve God and to fulfill his call on our lives, and she struggles to know where she fits in with that, kind of feeling like she's maybe not an expert at one specific thing, like relationship building or whatever the case may be, evangelism versus teaching, or what kind of that gifting is. And so she has some down moments of feeling like she's not doing enough. So that's really where the heart of it is prompted, is she struggles to want that. And I think it's such a cool thing that she wants that. She desires that. But it's heartbreaking in one sense to also see someone kind of beating themselves up for something that I don't feel like she should beat herself up for.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm sure many people share that experience. So.
No, I definitely, yeah, actually, I do relate to that. We have our like business meetings at this table as well, which you kind of walked in on when we were, and like hang out with people like Alan and Barb who have like lived like a lot of their lives for Jesus and hearing like the cool stories of what's going on. I'm like, man, I remember when I just started out working with them, I was like, man, I better get my agenda together because I feel like I'm not doing anything, man.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, at first it was just like, whoa, that's like so cool. I want to be like that. But there was also the part of like thinking that if I reach that point, then I've arrived at something that I currently haven't arrived at. And so I understand. Yeah, I really do feel connected to that question personally.
Sure.
And I guess we could just kind of start off by just saying like, the way I dealt personally with that tension when I was, sitting at this table with hearing the great and cool things that were happening and being like, well, what are you doing, Nick? Was maybe it wasn't the way I dealt with the way that God started to move in me to deal with that was to look at what I could do in terms of like my time. Like obviously I didn't have all this time like some of them had to go pour into like all these different relationships and to see therefore all these cool things. What I did have was a waiting job at a restaurant with people I knew kind of well. And I kind of started to like not expect myself to have to be them because haven't been a Christian for 40 years.
Right.
I haven't been, that's just not me. I've been a Christian for maybe a decade and I don't really know much. And something that Jesus said kind of comes to my mind about our relationship with what we know we're called to do and in us actually integrating that. But he talks about, those who have a certain amount of light, they should walk like in that light. The things that you've received, you want to participate in giving those away for free because you receive them freely. But those who think they've received what they even have, he says, will be taken away. So I kind of feel like that's not a call to perfection. That's a call from inactivity. Like you couldn't just receive what you've received in Jesus and like stay the same person. There's like no way.
Yeah.
Every time I see him in the Gospels meeting somebody, like no one ever walked away with like, it's like it's cool talk,
Yeah.
They were changed. So I'm kind of wondering, what are your personal thoughts when it comes to like, do you have a personal background as well with that question of like feeling like I'm not doing enough and how has God moved you, if any way, from that?
Yeah, I've been there in moments. Absolutely. And very similar. I think it's anytime you see someone like doing awesome stuff and you're just like, oh, I'm sitting at home, like working a 9-to-5 job. And it has nothing to do with, well, in my mind, it has nothing to do with God and the gospel. And I can try to bring it in here and there. But so I've been there. I think my thoughts in the struggle is like, going back to, I guess, the root of the question is often seeing my spiritual walk as kind of a checklist of here are your options of things you can do for the kingdom. Here's the menu of things that I can serve to the world. Yeah. And that has some sort of value. And it kind of throws to the side the idea of just that relationship and that the spirit that we have, I think, to just listen and be on the side of obedience rather than on the menu checklist side. Yeah,
you bring a great point to that because it's not about the transactional, I must get X, Y, and Z done, in and out. I always think of like that picture of work when you have like an in and out box where it's like you have like all these things you have to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but that's like not relational at all. And you're saying like we're in a relational faith. We have the Holy Spirit within us. And it kind of brought to my mind, there's this time where Jesus could have done more, but he chose not to, where he was in Capernaum. I think this is Mark chapter 2. He just ministered there all day. He healed. He went into the synagogue on a Sunday or Saturday, not a Sunday. He wasn't a Sunday Christian. He was a Sabbath Jew. So he went on there on a Saturday. He exorcised the demonic spirit. Everyone was totally taken with him. News of him spread everywhere. Then he's like not even done. He like goes into Simon Peter's house, heals his mom or his mother-in-law.
Yeah.
And then everyone starts getting brought to the house that have, illnesses or afflicted. And he just spends all night just, delivering people from demonic activity and also healing people. I mean, the way they word it is like, it's so all encompassing. Like this whole town, like basically changed literally overnight. And he goes early way in the morning, and he's praying. It says like, while it was still dark, he rose, and he went away. He was by himself. And then Simon Peter finds him, was like, dude, everyone's looking for you. And then like kind of Jesus, like, it's almost as if like Peter's like, dude, like, let's see. We want to see more of that,
right?
Like here, because you're popular here.
Yeah.
You have influence here. You have the ability to do things clearly. So like, let's throw all this and like, let's make this like the thing, like let's unveil you, Jesus part 2,
Go crazy with it.
But he was like, no, I have to go to other cities to preach the gospel. That's why I've been sent, I think is what he says. So I think in my mind, that time of prayer was centering for Jesus of like, he knew where he was supposed to go because his Father was showing him, and he could have done more. He could have done that menu.
Sure.
But he didn't choose to do that. He chose to actually just go to different cities maybe he wouldn't have that much influence in, because he was directed by his relationship, not by his transactional understanding of like, well, I could get this much pull and push.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. So I'm resonating with that. It's really relational. It's not like I have to see 7 of my neighbors come to faith before next year.
Right. Right. And then you're fulfilled, right? As a Christian, I've done my job. I can tell other people,
right,
I've made this impact, whatever the case is.
Right.
And it feels good maybe. But yeah, I think the other kind of direction I wanted to take the conversation, unless you had more thoughts on that, was more so, well, let me tell, I guess, a quick story. It basically, as you mentioned, we're in a group together that Nick leads, and we've been meeting with some friends and family just to talk to them about, I guess, their experience with Christianity and the church, etc. And so we actually got a question back from one of them that was asking this same thing of, explain to me why basically you don't think Christianity is just a set of like rules or restrictions. Like
wow.
That's kind of how I see it.
What a perceptive question.
Yeah. A pretty crazy question. I'll tell you how I responded. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. It sparked in me.
It's exciting.
I listened to a podcast from Sean McDowell. If you know who Sean McDowell is, he's a professor of apologetics at Biola actually right now. And his response to questions like this, I think, is interesting. He points back to there being purpose in creation. And I guess his story with this was he was a high school teacher at the time, and he was asking his high school students, what would life look like? Like, what is the perfect depiction of what life would look like in terms of just like an oasis? And they're like, I'm alone on an island. There's no rules. I can do whatever I want. And the more he kind of dug into them, started asking questions to them, they started realizing that maybe that's not a good way to live. And the example that really hit me hard was this idea of an iPhone and a basketball. Both were created with a very specific purpose. Right? So a basketball, right, it's round, it has air in it, kind of has some grippiness to it. And it was designed with a purpose to bounce, to be able to shoot into a basketball, right? To fairly simple purpose, to play a game with it. An iPhone, or just a phone in general, has another purpose, right? Very different technology, shape, size.
Totally.
You can call, text, a million things with those now. But if you were to try to reverse or switch those items and use them for the other purpose, you'd have pretty devastating results, right? The phone would just crash to the ground. If you try to text someone on a basketball, not going to work.
There's no networks that the basketball runs on.
Right. And so the idea I thought was really interesting is that if God designed this world with a purpose, we need to know what that purpose is to fully live and fully utilize it correctly. We need to know how that phone is designed and what its purposes are to use it to its fullest potential. So if we're living life in a way like there is no purpose, there are no boundaries or restrictions,
Yeah.
that's probably a much harder life than if we understand
Right.
the purpose
And
and the
destructive.
boundaries. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's
I
great.
thought it was an interesting,
How did that land with them?
there wasn't a lot of response other than, oh, that's, that's a good answer. That's an interesting thought.
Yeah. Where did you sense the question was coming from in them? If you had any perception, did you sense it was coming from their story?
Yeah.
From just their observations of you?
I think it comes from their story. Without getting into too much detail, this person, grew up Catholic. And so the Catholic faith they have a lot of traditions. I don't even know that much, but I know that they have traditions and they're a little bit more, I guess, ritual based than maybe we might be. But he's no longer in the faith. He's just kind of curious, sees Christianity as maybe a good movement for the world, a positive thing. Jesus was a cool character. And so I think it was more coming from an outside looking in as, I'm interested in this. I've been taught some things about it. But to me, it seems like it restricts me from doing things I want to do.
Yeah, well, I see that. I would say that you thinking about where it comes from, highly determined, because a question can come across like, okay, like why is there suffering in the world? I've heard apologetic people talk about this. Why is there suffering? Well, people would usually quickly make the distinction between an emotional answer and a logical answer to that question. But what's the person really looking for? If a person has just lost their father and they're asking this question, they're asking a very different question than a guy who's read Albert Camus and is doing philosophy. Okay, yeah. So it's like, I think you reading into where it's coming from helps you determine how to engage somebody. A person. I think I read this fantastic book called I Beg to Differ. And one of the things the author, who's I think from Biola, communications professor, I think, he said, we're not stance-oriented people. Christians aren't stance-oriented. Jesus wasn't stance-oriented, meaning he didn't just hold a number of different dogmatic opinions on different things. He was person-oriented. And so he understood people's particular situation before he answered or spoke to their situation. And I'm like, when I read that, I was like, dude, that's like solves so many of my personal evangelistic dilemmas, because I just want to hit them over the head with this idea, the stance that I have, and I want them to adopt that rather than connect with them as a person and understand where they're coming from and speak to them. There is a famous apologist who used to say, we don't answer questions, we answer questioners. And I always thought, okay, that kind of captures that ethos. So I just want to say out the outset, I think it's really good that you're thinking about it in terms of like, this person has a story, has the personal stock in this question. I may not know exactly what that stock is, but my best guess would be that their own experience in Catholicism is informing a lot of that. Right. And so I think that's what you said to them probably wasn't what they thought they were going to hear. Right. With that traditional framework. But I wonder what kind of a question they might need to be asked to realize that their question's coming from that place and not from, it's like vanilla and chocolate are like two different like ice creams, right? Yep. So like, I'm not going to taste vanilla and just like completely be like, oh, chocolate sucks. I don't like vanilla, so I don't like chocolate. Well, this person, they've experienced a cultural tradition, of Catholicism probably, and that's what they know ice cream tastes like. But ice cream, it's not all that, you haven't tried all 31 flavors, man. So you didn't like that, but that doesn't mean, reject. So it's like kind of processing through of like, well, when you see my life, what am I doing that communicates that I'm not in that particular tradition to you? You asked me why I'm living by a certain set of rules. Are there a certain set of rules you think I'm trying to conduct myself by? And why do you think those are things I'm trying to live by? What's informing that? I think engaging with questions is really good. Yeah. But engaging with answers is also, I think it kind of just depends on the circumstance. Most of the time though, I feel so much safer now going with a question, because it usually gets to the heart a lot quicker than the answer will. And then I'll know, this may be a horrible way of thinking about it, but like in terms of delivering truth that's sometimes hard to hear, I kind of sometimes tend to think of it like, You know, if you ever watch Star Wars and you watch them like glazing along like the inner trench valley of the Death Star to like deliver that one perfectly timed like thing to the middle for them to like their minds, you know, for the whole thing to blow up. I kind of think of it like, man, like it's so hard staying in there because things are shooting at you or whatever. It's so hard to stick to questions for a while to figure out what it looks like to actually deliver something of worth to them.
Oh,
that's going to blow their mind, you know, not them up, hopefully, blow their mind, you know. And I want to initially engage in answers. And a lot of apologetics today, what they train you to do, which I've been the perfect student of, and I've also been a perfect disaster as a result of, is give people lots of answers. And it hasn't worked for me. I just hasn't. Can't find one time that I just led with that stance-oriented way of living. That it's been personal and amazing encounter with the Holy Spirit. Oftentimes it's me sitting back, being like, "Where's this person at? Where are they coming from? Where's this question coming from? And how can I ask a question that will help them think a little bit more about this? Because maybe this isn't a one-off." Maybe this is a long dialogue that I continually readdress with them. And so I'm just thinking, I wonder what questions your friend or your family member, I wonder what kind of questions would engage them back, you know, on those types of things. I found that to be super helpful. And just before I say anything else, I will say, like, man, I think leading from a place of personal identification when it's true, I totally understand, you know, what you mean when you say, Christianity, it seems like just a bunch of rules to me. There was a time and place where that was true for me too.
Yeah.
You know, and just leading with that, because that may provoke them to go, well, what changed in you? And inviting you to share your story is very different than you to share your answer. And that's really cool, is you could share your story in that too.
Yeah.
And I think people are willing to, once they go, wait, you know what I mean? They're willing to invite you in a little more. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's amazing. You know, I wish that I would have almost gone with that instead. At the time, you know, that's all I could think of.
Yeah, like, that's great,
God,
though.
what do I say? Help.
Dude, and then God's in that. He's not only in questions, he's in answers, obviously.
But that's a skill, I think, to kind of be in that situation and think, how can I get closer to maybe the heart? Because I've been the questioner in other situations, maybe not even related to faith, but you ask something, but you kind of mean something else more specific.
Right.
Because you have like an experience or a thought in your mind and you want to see what they're going to say.
Sure.
And it just is a long drawn out process to finally get to what you actually maybe meant or were kind of looking for. So to be on the other side of that and to think already, how can I get closer to the heart of where this question is coming from? I think it's something to practice.
Yeah, it is. And it's hard. I fail at this all the time, which is part of the reason why I love doing the table, because this is helping me learn how to do that. It's so simple. It takes nothing of me emotionally and sometimes mentally just to delve out an answer. But when I have to sit here and really ponder, like, man, that's such a good question. Like, where does that really come from in you? You know, is that coming from your experience? It helps me be reminded that, like, everybody out there has a whole bunch of questions about everything. That's like true. You know, no one's sitting there. If they're completely self-satisfied and have no questions, like, I don't know if they're human, because like we all have these questions, but being a safe enough place to be a person to pitch those to, that's hard and it takes time. And I would just say to you that there have been times where I had these encounters that you described, and I'll go back and go, you know what? I was thinking the other day about the question you asked me, and I actually have a question for you about that.
Yeah.
And to kind of revive the conversation. I feel like I've never met anyone be like, no, I don't want to talk about that. So it's like never done. It's not like it's your conversation with this person that's finished. It's not, unless you want it to be. You can go back and say, man, I loved it. Like, I literally thought so much about what you said the other day. I actually was talking with some other Christians about that, and it made me have a whole bunch of other questions for you. And
that's good.
You know, you can always readdress that. So
we might have to do that.
I think that's a great idea. Yeah. If you want to do that, that's a good idea.
I'll come back and I'll report on episode 20.
Yes, you should. Yeah. So it sounds, you know, would you say that just in our brief conversation, would you feel like you've gotten a little bit more clarity about your own questions? Maybe not answers, but would you feel like you have another set of questions to ask those?
Yeah, I think so. I think that it's been, this last part especially, just inspiring for me to ask more questions, because there's a pressure to have answers.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
And good answers.
Totally.
So that's another topic, I feel like,
Oh,
for another
man.
day.
It totally is, dude.
But to be able just to say, you know what, I'm just going to ask questions back. I want to learn more about this person. I want to build this relationship further.
Yeah.
So that I can give better input when the time is right.
Yeah.
I think is
That's the Jesus way, isn't
key,
it?
man. Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. That's cool.
You know?
So.
Well, we're grateful that we got to have you bringing your questions to the table. These have been really thought-provoking. I hope they've been thought-provoking for those of you who are tuning in. Maybe you have a couple questions that you would also like to bring to the table to further explore. You are totally welcome to come. If you just leave a comment below this YouTube video, wherever you may find it, or if you want to email us at connect@northcountyproject.org. I'll get back to you personally, and I'd love to have you here with a nice cup of tea and a conversation. And if you want to continue to receive these videos on purpose, you can subscribe. And if you want other people to be able to see them, you can like them and share them wherever you may if you think they're very helpful. And so thanks so much for joining us again. We'll be back soon with one of the pastors at the church we met. So
That's right.
All right. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. Adios.